So what do you do, man? I mean, if you've got half the country moving towards this, half the country moving towards a convention of states, you've got a pulling away in opposite directions. The culture's already fractured. People have already been talking about civil war long before I ever brought it up.
I think the Convention of States is actually the antidote to a civil war. I think you're right. I think this country is increasingly divided, increasingly distrustful of the other side. Not just distrustful, they're of outright hatred of the other side. They believe that they have bad motives and want to hurt them and harm them. That is headed toward very ugly things. And what Mark has been able to do is take a lot of people who maybe feel that way, not maybe, they do feel that way, and channel them into something that the founders provided as the emergency escape clause.
You know, the problem with national popular vote from a marketing perspective, you said like the easy thing sells, right?
Yep.
Take away your vote to vote for your senator. That sounds bad. You're not going to repeal the 17th Amendment. National popular vote, when you say to people, well, it's ridiculous. Somebody wins the popular vote for president and then they're not president. That's a pretty good marketing tool, in my opinion. Much harder to counter, to explain to people why that doesn't work. So I think it's a very dangerous movement. I agree with Rick. I agree with you. I think we are headed towards a civil war. I think the country is decoupling. Where I differ with a lot of people is I think it's awesome. And the reason I think it's awesome is because this is how our country has always been. We have some fantasy that we've been some unified country, like right before the American Revolution when the colonies hated each other and called each other blasphemers and were ready to go to... No, it was that way. After the Revolution, we get together and we decide we're going to form a government. We hate each other so much. We form the Articles of Confederation, gives the federal government no power because the colonies and then the states don't trust each other. We come out of that. There's a fantasy. We all love each other. Yeah, so much so in the 1860s, we have a civil war and we force a union.
80 years later.
Right.
But after the Civil War, we really liked each
yeah,
other,
exactly.
right?
Everybody, that's when things were calm and peaceful. It's crazy. It's
Not
never,
true.
it's
Was
ne-
it 1876? Was it the election was decided by a committee?
Yes. And so,
negotiation?
so we've never actually as a country liked each other very much.
Except, and this is what we forget. It was really after World War II.
Correct.
That's the only time, if you look at America, where there was a consensus. And it's because we had just gone through two world wars and a Great Depression. Yeah. And people were just tired of fighting and wanted to be at home with their family and raise children and not work. I mean, it was an idyllic time, but everyone thinks, oh, that was America. No, America was never like this. Was it a beautiful time? It was a great time. You could say a lot of great things about the 50s and 60s, but it didn't take long for us to say, well, look, there's agitating against injustice. That's always been the American way. Absolutely. And by the way, in many cases, certainly in the case of the 60s and the Civil Rights Movement, it was a great movement. We've always been a country that never just wanted everybody get along because we're always agitating for something better. And unfortunately, the ideology behind what's better since the 1960s, since after the Civil Rights Movement, has been destructive because it's been based on relativism, socialism, Marxism, and trying to bring that to this country. And now it's up to us to fight back this culture war, and the founders gave us the opportunity to do it.
It's about truth.
Yeah.
It is about truth.
Critical race theory, for instce.
It's a lie.
It's an ideology, right? And it's
also a lie.
It's twisted, and I love when I get challenged by I'll be on Facebook because I waste time on Facebook periodically. I have multiple monitors and I'm reading the news, and I had someone post about critical race theory and saying Republicans, they're crazy and they don't want you to learn history about racism or whatever. And so I quoted, I posted saying, the meme was like, it was a picture of the people getting the milkshakes poured on them. And then I just said something like, you using these people for your political ideology, blah, blah, blah. And then someone said, what is critical race theory to me? So I said, oh, you'd love to know. Let me tell you, because I do know. Critical race theory is a derivative of critical theory, Marxist ideology. The idea that there is an oppressor and oppressed class. Kimberly Crenshaw wrote in her book, because I read this, I read the chapter outlining the thesis, the basis, that Marx did not understand the racial tensions that exist in the United States, Therefore, the idea of class oppression didn't work, and you needed racial understanding, thus a critical race theory. And then I wanted to quote Derek Bell, who argued for segregation. Plessy versus Ferguson was a separate but equal. He argued in favor of it, saying the overturning of this in Brown v. Board of Education were mistakes. And I'm like, don't come to me trying to use the civil rights movement to justify your ideology when your ideology is rooted in overturning the civil rights movement. But these people don't know that. They don't read these things. They never actually read where critical race theory comes from. They follow the lies from the corporate press. So we're not up against there's the truth. The truth will set you free, but these people don't want to hear it. They're in tribes. They get their marching orders from whatever the TV tells them to do. And they claim that's not them. They claim it's the other side.
And that's why it's important for you to speak. That's why it's important for all of us to go out and not be afraid. What's happening in America until recently, and I give Donald Trump a lot of credit for this because he exposed the national media for the partisans that they were. And he did so by just punching them in the nose and getting them ticked off enough that they dropped any pretense of being fair and wanting to be journalists. And they revealed who they really are. All of us have seen it. And we look, I was in politics been in politics for 40 years. And for 30 of those years, Republican politicians would stand up to the media on occasion, but we didn't call them out for who they were. We knew who they were. We understood that 97% of the Washington press corps voted for Democrats, but we always tried to, the idea was, well, you don't get into an argument with someone who buys ink by the barrel. And so that was the credo of the Republican conservative movement, which is don't fight against the media because they'll crush you. And for one who did and got crushed, I was used as an example.